Once you turn 60, the only reliable support is not family, but these 5 pillars. Life is a cruel teacher, especially as you age. It hands out lessons without warning, stripping away illusions you once believed were unshakable. By 60, you begin to see a hard truth. The people and systems you relied on, your parents, your friends, even your own body, are no longer as dependable as they once were. You may have spent years giving to others, but now you start to wonder, who is truly there for you? Many enter this stage assuming family will always be their safety net. But reality proves otherwise. Children have their own lives and friends slowly drift away. The workplace that once needed you, it moves on without a second thought. And society, well, it tends to favor the young. But let me tell you something, this is not the end of your story. It is your wake-up call. If you want to live with dignity, independence, and peace in your later years, you must take control, starting now. There are 5 essential pillars that will determine whether you thrive or struggle. Miss even one and you may find yourself facing hardships you never expected. So listen carefully, because these 5 pillars will shape the rest of your life. Pillar 1. Health, your fortress of independence. A man with his health has 1,000 dreams. A man without it has only one. Ancient proverb. Socrates once said, "It is a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable." And yet, how many of us, by the time we reach 60, take our bodies for granted? In our younger years, we test the limits, eating whatever we please, skipping sleep, moving less than we should because we believe time is on our side. But by 60, time is no longer so forgiving. What once healed overnight now lingers. What once was effortless now takes effort. In the old days, warriors never stepped into battle without sharpening their swords. To enter old age without maintaining your health is no different than facing a battlefield unarmed. The difference? In youth, you had the luxury of bouncing back. At 60, every decision you make about your health determines whether you will stand tall or depend on others. Your body is your fortress, and if you let its walls crumble, you will find yourself at the mercy of a world that does not wait for the weak. Now, let me tell you a story, one that I learned too late, but one you still have time to heed. I once had a friend named Thomas. We grew up together, 2 wild boys in a small American town, where kids still played in the dirt, climbed trees, and spent summers barefoot. Tom was the fastest runner among us, always challenging us to races we could never win. He was lean, strong, and full of life, until the years stole that from him, inch by inch. Life, you see, has a way of wearing you down if you're not careful. Tom started working long hours in his 30s. He married, had children, and convinced himself that his health could wait. "I'll start eating better next year," he'd say, as he reached for another soda. "I'll exercise when work slows down," he promised, though work never did. By the time we were in our 50s, I barely recognized him. His once lean frame was burdened with extra weight. He moved slower, his breath came shorter. The spark in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by the exhaustion of years spent ignoring his body's warnings. Then came the morning when everything changed. It was a cold February day when Tom collapsed on his front porch. A heart attack. The doctors said his arteries were clogged. Years of bad eating, stress, and neglect had caught up. He survived, but barely. The man who once outran us all now needed help climbing stairs. I visited him in the hospital, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes. "I never thought it would happen to me," he whispered. "I always thought I had time." And that's the cruelest lie we tell ourselves, isn't it? That we have time. Tom spent the next 5 years trying to undo decades of damage. He changed his diet, started walking every morning, and treated his health like the lifeline it always was. But the weight of years lost was heavy. His knees, strained under excess weight for too long, gave out. His heart, though strengthened by new habits, would never be as strong as it once was. He fought hard, but the battle had started too late. He passed away at 67, not from another heart attack, but from complications of a life once neglected. I remember standing at his funeral, listening to his children speak of a father they adored, one who always worked hard for them but never took care of himself. And that's when it hit me. Tom had spent his whole life providing for others, believing that self-care was selfish. But what good is working for your family if you're not there to enjoy the years with them? What good is a lifetime of sacrifice if it leaves you too weak to enjoy the fruits of your labor? My friend's story is not unique. It is the story of countless people who believe that health can wait until their bodies remind them that it cannot. At 60, you no longer have the luxury of postponing your well-being. If you do not make health a priority, it will become your burden. Exercise is not a luxury, it is the oil that keeps your body's machine running. A good diet is not about vanity, it is the difference between vitality and dependence. And sleep? It is not wasted time, it is the repair work that keeps your body strong. The truth is, you don't need to be an athlete. You don't need to spend hours in the gym, but you must move. Walk every day, stretch your body, lift something heavier than a grocery bag. Eat food that fuels you, not food that slowly destroys you. And rest, because a well-rested body fights disease, sharpens the mind, and gives you the strength to live fully. I am telling you this because I have seen too many good people leave this world too soon. I have buried friends who could have lived longer, held hands with those who wished they had done things differently, and I have seen the pain of regret in their eyes. But you still have time. I want you to imagine yourself 10 years from now. Are you still standing tall? Are you still strong enough to carry your own groceries, to walk without pain, to live without relying on others for the simplest things? Or do you find yourself trapped in a body that has become your prison, burdened by years of neglect? The choice is yours. Treat your body with respect and it will carry you far. Ignore it and it will leave you behind. Now, I ask you, my friend, what will you do with the years ahead? Will you make your health a priority, or will you let time decide for you? Have you already faced a wake-up call like Tom's, or are you still waiting for a sign? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, what changes are you making today for a stronger tomorrow? Let's learn from each other, because wisdom is not just about knowing, it's about sharing. And if this message spoke to you, pass it on. Someone you love might need to hear it. Pillar 2, Financial Security, the key to stability and peace of mind. When prosperity comes, do not use all of it. Confucius. There is an old Cherokee saying, "The man who builds his home on the wealth of today without thinking of the winter ahead will soon find himself in the cold." Financial security is not just about having money, it is about having control. It is the difference between lying awake at night, fearing an unexpected bill, and sleeping peacefully, knowing you are prepared. When we are young, we work hard, believing there is always time to save. But at 60, time is no longer our ally, it is our greatest test. Many enter their later years unprepared, expecting their children, the government, or luck to catch them if they fall. But let me tell you a hard truth. Dependence is a dangerous gamble. When the paychecks stop, expenses do not. And without financial security, stress becomes your constant companion, eating away at your health, your relationships, and your dignity. I have lived through times of abundance and times of hardship, and if there is one lesson life has taught me, it is this. Money is not everything, but the lack of it will control everything. Let me tell you a story. I had an old friend named Walter. If you had met him in his younger days, you would have sworn he had it all figured out. He was the kind of man who lived for the moment, drove the newest cars, took lavish vacations, and always picked up the check at dinner. He worked hard and he spent harder. Money is meant to be enjoyed, he used to say, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. You can't take it with you when you go. And for a long time it seemed he was right. Walter had a good job in construction. He made a solid living, but he never thought about the years ahead. Retirement seemed like a distant dream, something for old men to worry about. When his friends put money into savings or investments, he laughed. "You're saving for a future that isn't promised," he'd say. "I'm living while I can." But time, as it always does, marched on. At 60, Walter's body began to betray him. Years of labor had taken their toll, his knees ached, his back stiffened, and work became harder. Then, one day, it happened. A routine day on site turned into disaster. A slip, a bad fall, and in a single moment, the career he had depended on was gone. He thought workers' compensation would be enough. It wasn't. He thought Social Security would cover him. It didn't. And when the bills kept coming, Walter realized something terrifying. He had spent a lifetime earning, but not a single year preparing. His savings? Gone. His investments? He had none. The bank owned his home and debt clung to him like a shadow. The man who once picked up every tab now struggled to buy groceries. I will never forget the day I visited him in that tiny apartment, the one he had been forced to rent after losing his house. He was thinner, quieter. The light in his eyes had dimmed. "I never thought it would be me," he admitted. "I thought I had time." The truth is, Walter had been wealthy in his youth, but poor in wisdom. He had mistaken comfort for security, believing that money would always flow as freely as it had before. But money is like the seasons, it comes and goes, and those who do not prepare for winter will suffer in the cold. Walter's story is one I have seen repeated too many times. It is the story of people who mistake income for security, who believe that having a paycheck means they are safe, but the moment that paycheck stops, reality arrives, often with cruel consequences. At 60, you must ask yourself, are you prepared? Savings and investments are not just about accumulating wealth. They are about ensuring you are never at the mercy of circumstances. Even if you start late, discipline can create security. Debt is a silent predator. The less you owe, the more control you have. Financial freedom does not come from having millions. It comes from having the flexibility to live life on your terms. Healthcare costs can wipe out a lifetime of earnings in an instant. Planning for medical expenses, investing in insurance, and securing long-term care are not optional. They are survival strategies. And here is the most important truth of all. Financial security is not about being rich, it is about having choices. The choice to live where you want, to seek the care you need, to support the people you love without sacrificing your dignity. The best time to prepare was 20 years ago, the second best time is today. Now, I ask you, where do you stand? Have you built a financial safety net, or are you still hoping that everything will work itself out? Have you seen people like Walter in your life, or do you worry that you might be on the same path? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it, because this is a conversation too many people avoid until it is too late. And if this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because the greatest gift you can give yourself is not just money, it is peace of mind. Pillar 3. Purpose. The anchor for fulfillment and meaning. When a man does not know what harbor he is making for, no wind is the right wind. Seneca. There is a story from the old days, one that has been passed down through generations. A wise blacksmith lived in a small American town, forging horseshoes and tools with skill unmatched by anyone. For 50 years he worked tirelessly, his hands calloused, his face streaked with soot. But then, one day, he hung up his apron and retired. At first, he enjoyed the rest, but as the days stretched into months, something strange happened. He felt restless, empty. He wandered the town, feeling invisible among the people he once served. The fire in his forge had gone out, and with it, so had the fire in his soul. One evening he sat on his porch, staring at his idle hands, when his grandson approached him with a broken toy. "Grandpa, can you fix this?" And in that moment, something stirred inside him. He took the toy, examined it with his practiced eye, and with steady hands he repaired it. The boy's face lit up with joy, and the old blacksmith felt something he had not felt in a long time: purpose. I once knew a man named Robert. If you had met him in his younger days, you would have been impressed. He was a hard worker, the kind of man who built his identity around what he did. He ran a small family business, worked long hours, and raised his children with discipline and love. He was respected in his community, known for his wisdom and generosity. For decades, his days had structure. His mornings started early, his mind focused on solving problems, managing people, and ensuring his family had everything they needed. Every evening he came home tired but satisfied, knowing he had spent his energy on something meaningful. But then one day it all stopped. At 65, Robert retired. His children were grown, the business passed on. For the first time in his life, he had no deadlines, no schedules, no responsibilities pressing on him. He had earned his rest, everyone told him, but instead of peace, he felt lost. At first he enjoyed the freedom, waking up late, watching TV, doing nothing. But as the weeks passed, a strange feeling crept in. He felt unnecessary, forgotten. The phone calls slowed, the visits from old colleagues stopped. His children, busy with their own families, assumed he was enjoying retirement, but he wasn't. One day I visited him. He sat in his chair, staring blankly at the wall. The man who had once been so full of life now looked defeated. "I don't know who I am anymore," he confessed. "For 40 years I knew my role. I was a father, a businessman, a provider. But now, what am I?" His words hit me hard, because this is the silent crisis of aging. Society tells us that retirement is the reward for a life well lived, but it does not tell us how to fill the empty space that follows. The truth is, purpose is not something you retire from. Robert had spent decades believing that his work gave him meaning, but purpose is not found in paychecks or promotions. It is found in what we contribute, in the lives we touch, in the difference we make. So I asked him, "What is something you still love to do?" He hesitated. Then, after a long pause, he said, "I used to love woodworking." "Then why did you stop?" I asked. He had no answer. The next week, I brought him a set of carving tools. At first he resisted. "I'm too old for this," he said. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It matters if it gives you a reason to wake up in the morning," I told him. Reluctantly, he started carving again, small things at first, simple designs. But as the days passed, something in him changed. His hands, once idle, found their rhythm. His mind, once filled with doubt, found focus. He started making toys for his grandchildren, repairing furniture for neighbors. People started coming to him, not as a businessman but as a craftsman, a mentor. And just like that, Robert found his purpose again. Many people believe that purpose has to be grand, that it must be some great mission, some huge achievement. But the truth is, purpose is found in the simple things: helping a neighbor, mentoring a young person, learning a new skill, sharing wisdom. Studies show that people with purpose live longer, healthier lives. Their minds stay sharper, their hearts stay stronger. They wake up each day with something to look forward to. The greatest mistake we make as we age is believing that our best days are behind us, that we have nothing left to offer. But the purpose is not about looking back. It is about discovering what comes next. So I ask you, my friend, what is your purpose? Do you still have something that excites you, that challenges you, that gives you meaning? If not, I promise you, it is not too late to find it. Now, I turn to you. What is something that has given you purpose in your later years? Have you struggled with losing your sense of identity after retirement? Or have you found new ways to stay engaged and fulfilled? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation, because wisdom is not meant to be kept. It is meant to be shared. And if this message spoke to you, pass it on. Someone you know may need to hear it today. Pillar 4. Resilience, the mindset that shapes your reality. Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one. Bruce Lee. There's an ancient proverb that says, "A tree that bends in the storm does not break." Life, much like the changing seasons, is filled with moments of sunshine and storms. And by the time we reach 60, we have weathered our fair share of both. But here is a truth many struggle to accept. Aging does not make life easier. It does not smooth out the road ahead. In many ways, it presents new tests: the loss of loved ones, the aches of a changing body, the fading of things we once took for granted. Yet, some people grow stronger with time. They face hardship with grace, finding meaning in the trials they endure. Others, weighed down by bitterness, let their hardships define them. What separates them is not fate nor fortune, it is resilience, the ability to adapt, to stand firm in the face of pain, and to believe that life still holds meaning, joy, and possibilities. Let me tell you a story, one that might remind you of someone you know. I once knew a woman named Margaret. If resilience had a face, it would have been hers. Margaret was born in the 1940s, a time when life demanded more than it gave. She grew up during war rations, learned the value of $1 before she could write her own name, and saw hardships that would have crushed a weaker spirit. But Margaret was not weak. She married young, built a family, and spent decades raising children who, like all children, eventually grew up and left to chase their own lives. And then, life tested her again. At 62, she lost her husband to cancer. 50 years of marriage gone in a handful of months. The house they built together suddenly felt too big, too empty. The silence at night was unbearable. People told her time would heal the wound, but grief does not follow a schedule. It lingers, reshaping everything in its path. For months, Margaret drifted through life like a ghost. She stopped gardening, stopped attending church, stopped calling her friends, and for a while it seemed as though she had given up, until one day, everything changed. It was a rainy afternoon when she heard a knock at her door. It was her granddaughter, Emma, her brown eyes filled with worry. "Grandma, can you teach me how to make Grandpa's cornbread?" At first Margaret hesitated. The kitchen had been a shared space, filled with memories too painful to touch. But something about the way Emma asked, the longing in her voice, made Margaret realize something. Her story was not over. So she tied on her old apron, wiped her tears, and stepped back into the kitchen. She measured the flour, explained each step carefully, and as the smell of warm cornbread filled the house, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Purpose. That moment led to another. She started cooking more, then teaching Emma and her friends. Soon, the local church asked her to hold cooking classes for widows who, like her, had lost more than just a spouse. They had lost their sense of self. Margaret, a woman who once felt she had nothing left, became a source of strength for others. She laughed again. She made new friends, and slowly she built a new life, not by erasing the past, but by choosing to keep living despite it. People often believe that resilience is about toughness, that it means pretending things don't hurt. But resilience is not about avoiding pain. It is about facing it, feeling it, and choosing to move forward anyway. By 60, we have all lost something. A loved one, a dream, a version of ourselves that no longer exists. But loss is not the end of your story, unless you allow it to be. Regrets? We all have them, but the past cannot be rewritten. What we can do is learn, forgive ourselves, and move forward with the wisdom we have gained. Isolation is the enemy of resilience. Aging does not mean withdrawing from life, it means redefining it. Engaging in new experiences, staying curious, finding connection, these are the things that keep us strong. And perspective? It is everything. Life's hardships are like storms, temporary, passing. The sun always returns, but only if we are willing to look up. Now, I ask you, what have you endured? What has shaped you, tested you, made you stronger? Have you faced a moment when you thought you could not go on, only to find a new path waiting for you? Share your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that no matter how many years pass, life is still worth living, and if this message spoke to you, share it. Someone out there may need to hear these words today. Pillar 5. Community. The people who walk beside you. A sorrow shared is half a sorrow. A joy shared is twice a joy. American proverb. There's an old saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Life teaches us a hard truth. No matter how much we love our families, they cannot be our only source of connection. Children grow up, partners age, and friendships drift if they are not nurtured. If you rely on only a handful of people to fill your heart, you may one day find yourself feeling empty. The greatest mistake people make as they grow older is assuming they do not need new relationships, that the bonds of the past will be enough to sustain them. But community is not something we inherit, it is something we build. And at 60, the difference between loneliness and fulfillment often comes down to the people you choose to surround yourself with. Let me tell you a story of loss, love, and the unexpected places we find belonging. I once knew a man named Harold. Harold grew up in a time when family was everything. He was raised in a house filled with siblings, cousins, and Sunday dinners that lasted for hours. When he became a father, he carried that same spirit into his own home. He worked hard, provided for his children, and took great pride in seeing them grow. For decades, his life revolved around them. But then, life shifted. Just as it always does. His children moved away, each one following their own path. First his daughter left for the city, chasing her career. Then his son joined the military, settling halfway across the country. At first the distance was manageable. They visited on holidays, called Sundays. But as the years passed, the calls became less frequent. The visits grew shorter. And then, one day, Harold's wife passed away. Suddenly, the house that had once been filled with laughter and footsteps was silent. The walls, once a source of comfort, felt like a cage. Harold told himself he was fine. He had his books, his memories. But loneliness is a creeping thing. It does not announce itself loudly, but seeps into the spaces between your thoughts. One day, after yet another evening spent in silence, Harold went for a walk. He found himself near the community center, where he heard the sound of voices, laughter, conversation. Curious, he stepped inside. There he saw a group of people, men and women his age, sitting in a circle, sharing stories over coffee. They weren't old friends, they weren't family, and yet there was something familiar in the way they spoke, in the way they saw each other. He hesitated at the door. He wasn't sure if he belonged. But then an older woman, her hair silver, her face warm with kindness, gestured to the empty seat beside her. "We've got room for one more," she said with a smile, and just like that, Harold sat down. At first he mostly listened. He heard stories of people who had lost spouses, who had children too busy to visit, people who had built new friendships later in life, proving that connection is not limited to youth. Slowly, Harold began to share his own stories. He laughed, he listened, he found himself looking forward to these gatherings, simple moments, but ones that reminded him that he was not alone. Over time, these strangers became his people. They celebrated birthdays together, they checked in when one of them fell ill, they showed up for each other in a way that family sometimes could not. And Harold learned something that changed his life. Family is not just who you are born with, it is who walks beside you when life gets hard. Many people believe that loneliness is just a feeling, but studies show that loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It weakens the immune system, increases the risk of heart disease, and speeds up cognitive decline. Community is not just about companionship, it is about survival. But here's the thing. Community does not happen by accident, it must be built. Quality over quantity. It is not about having 100 friends, it is about having a few people who truly matter. Letting go of draining relationships. Some people take more than they give. You have the right to choose relationships that bring you peace. Engaging with like-minded people, whether it's a church group, a volunteer organization, or a hobby club, surrounding yourself with people who share your values keeps you mentally and emotionally strong. Loneliness is not inevitable, but waiting for someone else to fix it is a mistake. If you want a connection, you must take the first step. Now I ask you, who is your community? Do you have people in your life who lift you up? Or have you found yourself growing more isolated with time? Have you ever had to rebuild your circle, finding connection in unexpected places? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's remind each other that no matter how many years pass, we are never too old to find new people who matter. And if this message resonated with you, pass it on. Someone out there may need to hear these words today. Life after 60 is not about retreating, it is about rebuilding. Your strength is not in the years behind you but in the choices you make today. Health gives you freedom, financial security gives you peace, purpose gives you direction, resilience gives you strength. Community gives you belonging. Neglect even one of these and life becomes harder than it needs to be. But nurture them and you will find that aging is not a decline, it is an evolution. Now, I ask you, which of these pillars are you working on? Have you faced challenges in maintaining them or have you found new ways to strengthen them? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just be the inspiration someone else needs. And if this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Pass it on. Because wisdom, like a strong foundation, is meant to be shared.